They are celebrated as heroes. They are photographed in mansions, at parties, in million-dollar campaigns, ready to enchant the world. But there is a truth that the NBA does not want you to know. What happens when an athlete stops being just a player and becomes the biggest money machine the league can create? In this video, we will reveal the secret contracts, the stupid numbers, the uncontrollable power of agents, and why some players became the biggest mistake of this system. Cooper Flagg has just arrived in the NBA, but he already has the pressure of a veteran superstar on his shoulders. At 18 years old, the young prodigy became the #1 pick in the 2025 draft. With a contract that is already breaking records, he is guaranteed more than $62 million in his first 4 years as a professional, the highest starting salary in history for a rookie. And that's without counting the endorsement deals he accumulated while still in college, where he made millions from his image before even making his debut as a professional player. But what no one is saying is how much this value, this label, all this hype, are traps disguised as glory. Cooper is not just entering the NBA, he is being swallowed up by a machine that turns teenagers into money-making machines and demands perfection as a condition to not be discarded. He will earn around $13.8 million in his first year and could exceed $930 million in his career if he achieves certain goals: All-NBA, MVP titles, statistical consistency. It sounds like a dream, but in reality it is a contract full of emotional traps. Each clause, each bonus, each raise depends directly on the image he maintains and the immediate performance he delivers. The pressure to perform does not come only from the fans, it comes from the NBA itself, from sponsors, from the media, from the market. At less than 20 years old, he is already at the center of a gigantic corporate plan. The NBA does not just want him to play well, it wants him to be the new face of the league, the new global reference, the perfect young hero, and that requires much more than basketball. It demands image, controlled speech, constant presence, obedience to commercial narratives. There is no room for failures, emotional crises, or periods of adaptation. If he succeeds, he will be treated like a demigod. But if he does not meet expectations quickly, if he stumbles in the first seasons, the same system that today elevates him will bury him. It will call him a disappointment, a bust, a false promise. History has already done this with dozens of young people. Cooper Flagg has not even played yet and is already seen as a high-value brand. He hasn't proven himself on the court as a professional, but he's already raking in millions in advertising. And while the world sees him as the next big name in basketball, he knows deep down that he's being pressured as if he were already a veteran. This creates a kind of silent, constant, cruel pressure. He's talented, he's dedicated, but he's also young, and the NBA has a history of crushing young players it created. The league builds myths, demands they perform like legends, and then feigns surprise when they collapse. What no one wants to admit is that Cooper Flagg, before he even dribbled past a defender in the NBA, was already bought, sold, promoted, invested in, and placed under a lens that can destroy any human being. He can become a legend, yes, but he can also get lost along the way, like so many others. Because in the modern NBA, success doesn't depend solely on talent, it depends on emotional survival. And while all the spotlight is on him, the real question is, who will hold Cooper back when he can no longer hold the system? LeBron James, a name that, in itself, transcends basketball. A player who, while breaking records on the court, has also become the personification of the financial empire that the NBA has built over the last few decades. But what few dare to say is that, behind the highest salary in the history of the league, there is an uncomfortable truth. A truth that the NBA, the media, and even the fans prefer not to face. The silent cost of transforming a human being into a walking billion-dollar institution. From the beginning, LeBron was not just a rising talent, he was an investment, a brand, a product carefully packaged to be consumed on a global scale. At 18 years old, without even stepping foot on a professional court, he already had multi-million-dollar contracts with Nike and an expectation on his shoulders that no teenager should have to carry. And that was just the beginning. Throughout his career, LeBron accumulated more than $500 million in direct salaries, becoming the highest-paid player in NBA history. But that number alone doesn't tell the whole story, because the money he made was never just for playing basketball. He was paid to keep a narrative alive, that the NBA is a land of endless opportunity, that if you're good enough, disciplined enough, and media-savvy enough, you can become a god among men. But that's an illusion built on a system that burns its players to the point of exhaustion. LeBron became the face of the league, the shield, the engagement machine. His every move was meticulously analyzed, his every word dissected, his every defeat turned into a national crisis. And at the same time, his every win was a bargaining chip for a brand that used him as a symbol of excellence. But did anyone really care about the man behind the myth? While the media celebrated his accomplishments, there was rarely any discussion of the psychological toll of living under such constant scrutiny for 2 decades. LeBron was never allowed to just be a player. He had to be a politician, a businessman, a philanthropist, an idol, a husband, a father, and, above all, impeccable. because any slip-up would make headlines, any hesitation would be questioned. And in the process, the human being LeBron James was gradually suffocated by expectation. The system that made him the highest-paid player in history is the same one that suffocates promising talents every year. A system that rewards perfection of performance and punishes vulnerability, that offers incalculable fortunes, but exacts an invisible price: peace of mind, privacy, autonomy. What is not said is that much of LeBron's fortune comes from strategic decisions that positioned him as more than an athlete. He didn't just sign contracts, he negotiated productions in Hollywood, founded companies, acquired stakes in brands and teams. He played the corporate game like no one else. But all of this came at a cost, because to be accepted at this elite level, he had to shape himself, polish himself, make himself marketable. The LeBron we see on camera is not the same one who breathes silently when the lights go out. And this, perhaps, is the greatest reflection of what the NBA really demands of its biggest names. Behind the astronomical number in his bank account, there is a man who never had the right to disappear, to rest, to fail, because each mistake he makes represents billions at risk. And it is this kind of invisible prison that the NBA builds around its idols. They earn absurd amounts, yes, but they also lose something that money can never buy back: the freedom to be imperfect. And anyone who thinks that LeBron controls all of this is mistaken. Deep down, he is just another cog in a much larger machine. A key piece, of course, but still, a piece. Because while he delivers historic performances and carries franchises on his back, the NBA makes trillions selling his image to the entire world. It is a business based on idolatry, but fueled by the silent sacrifice of its protagonists. The truth that is never told is that being the highest paid player in the history of the league is not necessarily a personal victory. It is often a sentence. That of never being able to leave the scene, of always being available, always in shape, always strategic. LeBron built an empire, but he had to give up fundamental parts of himself to keep it going. In the end, he became everything the NBA wanted. And perhaps for that very reason, he lost the chance to just be human. Stephen Curry. When we think of a revolution in modern basketball, his name comes to mind first. The skinny kid who turned three-point shots into art, who destroyed defenses with a simple step back, and who, with a smile on his face, challenged the entire structure of the NBA. But what no one tells you is that, at the same time as he became one of the greatest figures in the history of the sport, Steph also became hostage to a system that needed him more as an icon than as a human being. It's easy to look at the numbers. Curry has already surpassed the $350 million mark in direct NBA salaries, with contracts like the $201 million five-year deal signed in 2017, the first contract worth more than $200 million in league history, and the subsequent $215 million four-year deal signed in 2021. Curry has positioned himself as one of the highest-paid players of all time. And that's without counting sponsorships and commercial deals that have turned his face into a global brand. But what's behind these billion-dollar contracts? What did the NBA really buy when it decided to make Stephen Curry the league's new poster boy? Steph was never just a point guard. He was the answer the NBA needed to clean up its image. After years dominated by controversies involving problem players and an increasingly physical and questionable game, Curry emerged as the family hero, smiling, charismatic son of a former player, religious, married to the same woman since the beginning. No scandals. A golden boy. But behind the gloss of this carefully constructed image, there is a story of constant pressure, silent crises, and decisions that Curry could never truly make for himself. Because when you become the face of the league, you no longer own your own destiny. Since his rise, the NBA has molded Curry to perfectly fit the role of icon. The marketing around his image has been designed with surgical precision. Everything about Curry, from the way he dresses to the way he answers interviews, was tailored to fit a narrative the league wanted to sell, that of the new American hero. And it worked. He sold millions of jerseys. He multiplied the NBA viewership. He turned the Warriors into one of the most valuable franchises on the planet. He made Under Armour a powerhouse in sportswear. He got his own line of sneakers. And yet, as he racked up the numbers and trophies, he also lost something subtle but profound: control over who he really was. Little is said about the fact that Curry behind the scenes faced emotional battles that never came to light. The ankle injuries that nearly ruined his early career. The seasons in which he was discredited, called fragile, underestimated by executives. The years in which, even though he was the best in the league, he didn't receive the respect that names like LeBron, Durant, and even Kawhi received. All of this created wounds that money can't heal. Curry also faced veiled criticism from within the NBA structure itself. Many saw him as too soft, too good to be true. His teammates often didn't see him as a leader on par with other, more vocal superstars. He was respected but not always feared, and that put him in a strange position: the best shooter in history, but still an icon who constantly had to prove that he deserved to be at the top. And what did the media do with that? They kept quiet, because admitting that Curry is also human, that he suffers, that he fails, that he feels pressured, would jeopardize the narrative that the NBA built around him. So, problems were swept under the rug. Moments of frustration were edited. Losses were justified by external factors, all to keep the image of the hero intact. The system that put him at the top also handcuffed him. Because to continue being Stephen Curry, he needs to keep smiling, keep up the good guy image, keep up the numbers, keep up the performance. There is no room for decay. There is no time for pauses. There is no room for doubt. And anyone who thinks that money has set him free is mistaken. The $350 million he earned does not buy freedom. When you are held hostage by an empire of expectations, the NBA needs Curry. It needs him to be functional, exemplary, profitable, but it does not care about his emotional exhaustion. It is not concerned with what it means to be the pillar of a global brand for 15 years. It just wants him to keep producing because he sells, because he works, because he fits. But for how long? How long will Stephen Curry be able to keep up the pace? How long will he be able to hide the weight of being the symbol of a league that uses and discards idols as quickly as it signs their contracts? Curry is beloved, but he's also a prisoner. And that's the truth the NBA will never reveal, that even the highest paid, most successful, most idolized players are still trapped in a system that treats them like replaceable cogs in a machine that can never stop. He was marketed as an example, a model of how to do everything right. But no one asked Stephen Curry if he wanted to carry that burden. Because in the end, it's not about how much he makes. It's about how much he had to sacrifice to earn that salary. And that no one sees, no one talks about. But now you know. James Harden was, for many years, the most feared name in the NBA on offense, an offensive genius, a creator of unpredictable plays, an MVP who seemed to have stepped out of a video game. But as the years went by, what really stood out were not only his dribbling and his three-point shots on the move. What really caught the eye was the number that appeared next to his name, the contracts, the salaries, the absurd amounts he received to be the face of franchises that, deep down, never fully accepted him. Harden has already received more than $340 million in direct salaries, and he was the protagonist of one of the most controversial contracts of the last decade, $228 million with the Houston Rockets, a deal that, at the time, seemed fair. After all, he led the league in scoring, was a constant presence in the All-Stars, and carried the franchise on his shoulders. But over time, this contract became a burden, not for the franchise, for him, because the more he earned, the more of a target he became. And the more he became a target, the less room he had to be human. Money bought comfort, luxury status, but it also bought pressure. Harden became a villain every time the team lost a culprit, every time a play didn't work, a traitor when he wanted to leave, a lazy person when he wanted to rest, and an arrogant person when he demanded respect. No other player in the modern NBA has been so criticized by the same system that put him at the top. Harden became a symbol of excess on the court, excess off it. His training sessions became a meme, his parties became a topic of discussion, his beard became a trademark, but also a shield, because behind that always smiling, always relaxed image, there was a visibly tired man, tired of carrying teams without structure, tired of being pressured like Jordan without receiving the same support, tired of reinventing himself every season to maintain his market value. The trades started piling up: Houston, Brooklyn, Philadelphia, Clippers for franchises in just a few years, and with each trade, a new contract, a new demand, a new pressure to perform. But no one asked what his mind was like in the midst of all this. No one stopped to think how inhumane it was to demand excellence from a man who moved from city to city like someone changing jerseys. The system just wanted him to keep scoring, keep showing up, keep generating statistics to keep the ratings high. Harden became a number, and the numbers over time stopped protecting him. They started to suffocate him. What the NBA doesn't say is that, while his contracts broke records, Harden dealt with injuries, emotional exhaustion, accumulated frustrations, that behind the scenes, he wasn't the man everyone saw dancing before games. He was someone who carried the weight of a narrative he could never abandon. The truth that was never told is that Harden's contract imprisoned him. Yes, he was well paid, but every penny he received came with an impossible expectation. And when he didn't meet these expectations, he was crucified. When he wanted to leave, he was labeled as unstable. When he played well, he was accused of only thinking about himself, and when he didn't play, he was called lazy. Harden never had an escape. The media built a character that was only useful as long as he delivered numbers, and the NBA exploited his image of a careless genius to the last drop. It was convenient, it brought ratings, it sold, but no one asked what it did to his head. The scariest thing about Harden's story is realizing that one of the greatest offensive talents in history could end his career remembered not for his records but for his judgments, not for his achievements but for his criticism. And all of this because the system refused to see him as a human being. The contract that made him one of the highest paid players in the league also condemned him because he came to be seen as too expensive to fail, too big to be traded with respect, too important not to be publicly massacred. And when the price is so high, any mistake becomes unacceptable. Harden was never the villain they painted him to be. He was just a player trying to survive in a system that demands perfection without offering humanity in return. And while many still remember his stepbacks and his 50-point nights, few remember the price he paid for each of those nights. In the end, James Harden was just another player that the NBA used, exhausted, and then forgot about. Because that's what the system does to its idols. It uses them until the last contract. And then it moves on to the next one. Because the machine doesn't stop. Because the show must go on. Even if to do so, it has to destroy the men who make it happen. Bradley Beal arrived in the NBA with star status, signing contracts that exceeded $200 million, one of the highest salaries in the league, the result of a solid career and impressive scoring. But what seemed like a dream became a trap. Bell lived under constant pressure to justify every penny he received. His high salaries brought immense expectations that, in practice, turned him into a hostage of the system. Every injury, drop in performance, or collective failure was interpreted as a personal problem. The financial giant became the target of merciless criticism. What the media and the NBA do not show is that Bell, despite all the money, suffered severe mental exhaustion. He had to deal with performance demands that went far beyond the court, faced public trials, and had his image exploited to the limit. Huge contracts do not guarantee success or peace of mind. On the contrary, for Bell, they meant an invisible prison, a commitment that tied him to a career marked by unattainable expectations and little room for failure. In the end, the salary that promised freedom became a burden, a constant reminder that in the NBA, money doesn't buy relief, it only increases the pressure. Russell Westbrook was one of the most explosive and intense players in the NBA. MVP, historic triple-doubles, dominant presence on the court. But his career was also marked by huge contracts that, instead of bringing stability, brought chaos. Westbrook signed contracts that exceeded $200 million, reaching one of the highest salaries in the league. But this money was not enough to prevent the sudden drop in performance, the constant changes, and, mainly, the emotional exhaustion that made him a clear example of the high price of being a star under pressure. The media often painted Westbrook as erratic and unpredictable, but few understood that this image was the result of the exhaustion of carrying a burden that went far beyond basketball. Each million-dollar contract increased expectations, and each failure was amplified and used to destroy his reputation. What the NBA doesn't reveal is that Westbrook, at his peak, was already facing deep internal crises, anxiety, frustrations, the feeling of not being able to fit into a system that changed around him. The pressure to justify stratospheric salaries ended up becoming his greatest enemy. He wasn't just a player, he was a symbol of the mental breakdown caused by the toxic mix of money, fame, and unattainable expectations. If you've made it this far, you know that behind the millions in historic contracts there is a truth that no one wants to tell. The NBA builds idols, but it also destroys minds. These players are not just numbers on the payroll. They are people who paid a very high price to maintain their shine. If you liked this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any hidden and dark stories from the NBA. Share it with your friends and comment on which of these stories shocked you the most. We want to know your opinion. Basketball is more than a sport. It's drama, it's mystery, it's hidden truth. See you in the next video.